Hello, my name is John Willard and I'm a composer, pianist, and teacher. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. In this video, I'm going to show you how I compose some of my original compositions using a special composing technique called musical cryptograms. And musical cryptograms is just a fancy way of saying that you can create melodies out of words and letters, and those words and letters are going to be hidden inside the music. So this technique isn't anything new. Composers as early as Bach and Schumann and others use this technique when they compose some of their pieces, and I'm going to show you how to do that in this video. So this video is great for those of you that are composers out there that want to try this technique for yourself. This is also good for piano teachers and anybody that teaches music in general. If you teach band, orchestra, or anything at the college level and you want to try this activity with your students to help them with writing their own music. And then this video is good for anybody that's interested in the creative process in general and also curious how I write some of my pieces that you can find on my YouTube channel. So this video is very detailed. It might be a bit long, but I have some timestamps that you're going to check in the description below if you want to skip to some chapters in the video. And I hope you enjoy this video about musical cryptograms. And without further ado, let's get started. All right, welcome to my video about making meaningful music and that you could have creative compositions using cryptogram composing. And again, we can create music that has special meaning using this approach. So this is a brief rundown of how the video is going to work. So I'm going to briefly talk about the history of musical cryptograms and give some notable examples from the past. I'll talk about the benefits of using this approach in composing. And this will also be a great section for piano students and piano teachers to take a look at as we talk about it. I'll talk about the cryptogram composing process and how you can create your own cryptograms and how that process works. And again, I'll give examples of how I've used that process in my own pieces that you can hear on my YouTube channel, as well as pieces that you can play for yourself as piano solos and chamber works. And then I'll talk about the preview of the composing process in action, or I'll show you and demonstrate on the piano. We're going to be taking a name from a famous fictional character, and I'm going to show you kind of a quick improv of how I'd go about making up a melody and then kind of working with that and how that unfolds. And finally, I'll end with additional resources that you could use to get started with cryptogram composing that you could try at home, and also if you work with students. So the cryptogram, what is it, and the history? So basically, cryptography, when you break down the word, it basically means secret writing. And it's the study of or the techniques about talking about securing information. And cryptography is a way of protecting or hiding information using codes. So again, certain people, we don't want to have access to this information, so we want to secure it and make sure that it's hidden away, and that's what cryptography is. And then a cipher is the set of steps or the process used to hide these messages. And again, algorithm is very important there. It's a process or ways that they hide the information. And then the cryptogram is the end result. The cryptogram contains the hidden message. So it could be a text, it could be music, it could be a document. And then the ciphers, again, are the process or the steps used that help create the cryptogram. And then we have the earliest ciphers. They fall into a few categories. Sometimes they were used for entertainment, and then other times they were used for secret warfare or communications. And again, it's all about having exclusive information that only certain people can have access to. The Egyptians sometimes used this for puzzles and games for people to solve, but also in a way, so the ancient Egyptians used this more so in their religious rites and kind of in their religious practices. So they used ciphers in the religious texts and in their burial chambers. And sometimes the hieroglyphics that they used were special pictures that were different than the everyday writing or everyday hieroglyphics that everybody else could read. And so these special pictures could be considered substitution because these hieroglyphics would stand out compared to the rest of them. And then they had sacred texts that they used. And then this could be, say, the writing, we call them the pyramid texts or the coffin texts. So they would write hieroglyphics all over the pyramids or all over coffins of pharaohs or deceased loved ones. And these instructions, they had spiritual guidance to help them, to help the deceased pharaohs in the afterlife, in their afterlife journey. And when we talk about cryptography, we talk about how the Egyptians used it. They weren't really ciphers in the traditional sense of hiding information. they weren't really trying to hide the information, but it was more so that they're like codes, in that in modern times we are still trying to translate what the codes mean and kind of what their hieroglyphics mean and put them into readable text and help us understand them today. Because again, cryptography is kind of like decoding information that we're not quite sure if we want to find out what the real message is. And with hieroglyphics and ancient history, it's still kind of a mystery as to what all of the characters mean. So that's kind of what it would be in kind of a cryptography sense. But to be more traditional about cryptography, and when we're talking about hiding messages and making sure that it's not being able to be read by anybody, it's more relevant when you talk about it in terms of, say, the Greeks and the Romans. So they used it in warfare, and they didn't want the other opponent to know what was happening, what was going on. So examples we have here, we have the Caesar cipher. So as you can see there on the right, say you have the scrambled message, and then it starts with the letter E, and then if you shift it over a few places, the real message or the true message would actually be the letter B. So that's again called a substitution cipher. And then you also have the skytail there on the left side, and that would have to be a code that had to be broken and understood. And then in warfare, you have it where it's very obvious in, say, World War I and World War II, where we had the U.S. allies where they used code books. And that, again, was another form of substitution where one word would actually stand for something else so that the opponents would get confused or not sure what's going on. And then we also had help from the Choctaw and Navajo code talkers. And then we also have the Germans, which they used their Enigma machine to hide messages. And then in the present day, anytime we talk about cryptography, it's mainly used in technology. So we have things that are hidden away, and kind of cryptic messages, or just not being able to be accessed easily through secure web browsing. Anytime you have a password, and anytime you have to deal with anything that has to do with like secure bank transactions or cryptocurrency, because again, crypto means hidden. So essentially, to summarize this portion, whenever you talk about cryptography, we're talking about things that are encrypted or things that are hidden away, and that's ciphertext. And then you decrypt it, meaning you decode it so that you're able to get the true message or the real message underneath what was hidden, and it's readable. So this is a music channel. This is a music video about music and composition. So what is it in terms of a musical cryptogram? That's what we're here for, right? So a musical cryptogram is a sequence of pitches or a melody that applies a relationship between note names and letters of the alphabet. And these letters and all that are hidden within the music. So to put it simply, words or messages are hidden within music. So cryptograms, they were used by composers in Western music with those of Bach, Brahms, Shostakovich, etc., and then many more that are listed besides those. And some of the references and some of the words and things that the composers wrote about in their music and hidden away with the notes, the composers referenced themselves and their own names and initials. Sometimes they put the names and initials of their friends or even lovers or secret lovers that they had. And then also they talked about their pets and even food. And at the time, there were two main systems that were used. So first we had the English/French system, and basically it's the same thing, only because the English language and the French language, they each have the same 26 letters in their alphabet. So it's basically the same thing. So as you can see there on the left side, so on the top, we have the 7 musical notes of the musical alphabet. So I'll play it here on the piano. We have A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. Give me 1 second here. All right, so we have A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. So those are the musical pitches we're using. And then if the word that you have, say, contains the other letters of the musical alphabet, so like say like an H, then the tone A would represent the letter H in whatever you're composing, right? So that's pretty straightforward. And then on the right side, we have the German nomenclature, or the German system notation. And they have special kind of instances where certain notes stand for different letters. So for example, Bach has his own motif. It sounds like this. right? And the reason we got that is because in German key notation, the B flat stands for the letter B, the B natural is the letter H, and then when you have accidentals or vowels, then we have suffixes. So IS is sharps, ES is for flats, and then S is the tone for if it's a vowel. So for example, if you have the note C sharp, it would be cis. If you have D flat, it would be des. And if you had E flat, it'd be S. And notice when you say S or you look at S, it could also sound like the letter S. So that's interesting about the German system. All right, so when we look at composers in history and how they used it, again, we have the Bach motif, which is very famous. Other composers have kind of riffed off it. But as you can see, he wrote his name in The Art of the Fugue. So you can see examples there. So that's one example of it you can see written out. And then we have Shostakovich. So his last name is very long, so he couldn't use all the letters, but if you ever see or hear the 4 letters that he has there, so that would stand for Shostakovich, and that's hidden within his pieces. So as you can see, very good examples to listen to or reference would be the String Quartet number 8. And then you also have his violin concerto, his cello concerto, and then his 8th, 10th, and 15th symphonies. And then we also have Schumann, who was very excited about puzzles and anything having to do with messages, and he had a very vivid imagination. He liked to be playful with things like this. So this is a very great example. And basically the basis of this whole video is that you can make up a name, or you have a name and then you make music from it. So the variations on the name Abegg is a prime example, and he basically starts off the piece with the cryptogram. So you have the main theme, which starts off with the note A, and then B flat would stand for the letter B, and then you have E and GG, which again is natural. So then you basically have the example of, and that is the name Abegg spelled out, but in note form. And then Schumann did this really well in Carnival, and it's interesting because you have the subtitle, which is Little Scenes on 4 Notes. So the 4 notes that he referenced in Carnival is A, E flat, C, and B. And then when you translate those notes into letters, it's A, S, C, H. And again, going back to what we talked about earlier, when you have an E flat, it translates to E, S. And then when you say it out loud, it sounds like S. And then again, B natural is the letter H. And then Schumann, he held a lot of significance for the letters ASCH that he was trying to communicate in this grand piece. So ASCH stood for Osh, which was the hometown of his former fiancée. And then when you have different note combinations, so A flat, C, and B can spell Osh because of the suffix with the flat, you have AS. And then you have E flat, C, B, A, that again could also be SCHA. And then the SCHA could stand for his name. So Robert Alexander Schumann, or SCHA is Schumann, could be found in his last name. And then Fasching in German means carnival. So again, you see ASCH inside the word Fasching, which is really cool. And then we have notes C and B natural, which would be the initial C and H, which stood for Chiarina, which is the Italian nickname that Schumann, or Robert Schumann, gave to Clara. So a lot of references there, which is really cool. All right. So what are the student-teacher benefits of using this approach, and just what's cool about it in general? So it's a creative exercise. So this is creative music making just in general. There's so many pieces you could do with it because it really takes a lot of thinking and kind of creativity when you're approaching composing. So I say this is a unique and challenging approach to explore composing because it's way more exciting to be like, I'm going to compose a piece about what I'm interested in. So like I'm into cats, or I'm into K-pop Demon Hunters because it's November 2025. I'm recording this. But like I'm into video games, I'm into Mario, I'm into Fortnite, I'm into Roblox. Like that's exciting. Let me write a piece about that. Or you tell your student, or the student says, I'm really into this thing I just learned about, versus you saying, let's write a piece in C major, or let's write a piece with 5 flats. Like that's not very engaging, right? So approaching cryptogram composing starting with a word or an idea and kind of literally using those letters in that word or idea is a great launching pad for creativity and getting students and even yourself to kind of get excited about writing music about it. So that's the point I really want to make in this video, to encourage self-expression and kind of encourage storytelling and things like that to, make composing fun. And then also, like in the second bullet, I'm saying it relates directly to student interests. So when students write about pieces that they're interested in, it's going to have personal meaning to them and they'll be more emotionally invested into whatever they're writing or whatever they're creating. So again, if they're really into K-pop Demon Hunters and they want to write a song about Rumi or Derpy, then they're really going to have fun trying to compose a piece that represents these characters or what they feel about it or what story they want to tell about it. And then we have original student compositions as a benefit. So the example I like to give here is that say you have a group of students and that they all choose the same idea. So say they want to write a piece about dogs. So you may think, oh no, it's all going to be the same, but actually that's all going to be original and they're all going to be unique pieces about dogs because there are different elements that make each piece unique. So even for the first starting note, the D for dog, it could start anywhere. So one student could have the D above middle C. That could be their starting note. Another student could start the D up here. So that already is a difference, and that'll make it original. And then the student could choose a different rhythm if they're going to have the melody of dog, because, what's the rhythm going to be? They're all going to choose different rhythms. And then also how the piece of dogs is going to sound. Is it going to be about happy dogs? It's going to be at sad dogs. So again, it leaves a lot of variety and a lot of kind of excitement to say, oh, students are going to compose something original that means something to them, even if they all choose, say, the same word, idea, or concept. And then another benefit is that it reinforces theory knowledge that students already know, but then it could also introduce new concepts. So say, for example, a student's really strong in their understanding of scales or kind of keys that they're in, so they're going to put that in their piece that they write. But say they're not really strong about rhythm, so they imagine a piece that they want to write and they think it's really cool, and in their head they think of a certain rhythm that they want to use, but then they're not quite sure how to notate it. So this is where theory comes in about rhythms and placement and all that, and that's where you as a teacher, or you can look up resources for them and you can come in and help them develop that skill or that new concept of this is how rhythm works, or this is how you would line it up on the page, or this is how it interacts, say, melody versus the left hand or accompaniment, right? And then finally, we have the benefits of cryptogram composing, and that it explores keyboard sounds. So basically, you're able to try to maybe think about how do you create effects with the concepts that you're using. So say a student's writing a piece about anger, or how do you express that through music? Like, what does that sound like on the piano? Is it going to be a bunch of notes like this? Or like, how would you notate that? Like, what does that sound like? So that really gets students thinking, especially piano students, thinking about how do we create these sounds at the keyboard? And that's, again, something they're creating because they're approaching composing through the lens of an idea and a concept, and they're writing melodies through it. So again, they're going to get used to creating effects at the piano, or how does that sound? And then when you have melodies that you're creating, so sometimes certain words, when you put them as a melody, they might have different intervals that don't sound so good, if that makes sense. So basically, if you have a word and the melody line doesn't sound very melodic, or it has a lot of jumps into it, then that gets students thinking that, oh, this melody that I create doesn't sound like the music I'm used to listening to. It doesn't sound like a regular pop song melody. It doesn't sound like a singable melody. But that opens students' ears up to that music doesn't all sound the same. So when you think about new music, when you think about contemporary music, when you think about, say, serialism or aleatoric music, things like that, you can expose students to that genre. And then since they've written music themselves that doesn't sound quote unquote normal, or like what they're used to, or very melodic, then they're not going to be as resistant to learning about it, or they're going to understand, oh, music doesn't all sound the same, but it's still music, right? And a little footnote here. So personal meaning for these pieces, it can come from experiences, art, and feelings. So not just regular words or names of people. So you can really expand the concept of, what is personal to you and what do you want to write about is really fun. And that's way more exciting than just saying, oh, we're going to write a piece in, one sharp. So that's a really big point I want to make here. All right, so the cryptogram composing method, examples, and you. So getting started with this composing process or this approach, it has a few steps to it, trying to make it simple. So again, you want to start with some sort of inspiration or idea. So you take a person, you take a place, you take an experience, and all you have to do is you replace the letters of that thing, person, place, or thing, or experience, and then you replace it with musical pitches using, say, the French English system. So that's step number one. And then number two, you have an intention. So what do you want to create? Do you want to create a piano solo? Do you want to create a, say, violin solo or trumpet solo? Do you want to create a piano duet? Do you want to create a vocal piece? What instrument are you making this for? What kind of arrangement is this? You want to think about that as far as like, what are you trying to make? And then step number three is, what's the musical effect that you want this piece to have? So basically, let's say, go back to the example I said earlier, if you're writing a piece about dogs, like what mood will this piece about dogs have? Are we writing about happy dogs? Are we writing about sad dogs? Are we writing about an adventure the dogs are going on? That's something you want to think about when you're writing this piece, whether it be for piano or some other instrument. And then I put here, it says you want to start with adjectives. So again, what kind of dogs are we writing about? And then how would you express that through music? And then also think about, how do you want to feel when you play this music? Or how do you want the audience to feel when they hear this music about dogs? Or, what's the mood of the piece, basically? So that's something really interesting and cool to think about. And then who or what is this for? So is this piece for you to play or for you to kind of just have as a own personal project and not really share with anybody, which is fine. You can totally do that. Or is this piece for others to play or for an audience that you're going to share this with? Is this kind of a piece about dogs that you're going to dedicate to somebody that likes dogs? Or is this for a recital? Is this for a class assignment? Or if you're making this piece for, say, a student, you want to be aware of what playing level is this piece going to be. You don't want to make it too hard that they can't play it, but you also want to make sure that they're going to be able to play it or have some value with it, right? And then finally, with any type of creative project, you want to set a timeline and a deadline. So here I like to say, since there's a lot of steps that go into even creating a piece, because it's a big deal to create a melody and accompaniment and all that, you want to kind of set mini goals and mini wins, right? So maybe step one could be, I want to think of a source or think of an idea, and I want to make a melody out of that. So first step number one for week one is translate the letters of the word that I chose into notes. And then step two could be, okay, after week number two, I'm going to make a rhythm for the melody and how that's going to sound. And then week number three, I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to make a piece for flute. It's going to be a flute solo. So again, just go step by step, kind of give yourself a deadline, and then eventually you'll get to the end of it where all the parts will fit together, and then it won't be so overwhelming for you. All right, so we're talking about, again, composing using cryptograms, and I think the easiest approach is using the French/English system. And like I have here on the left side, that's the original system where you have 7 pitches, and then you have the letters underneath that you would line up. And then what I like to do, and sometimes you can do this is totally optional. I just like symmetry and how it looks. So I shifted the last line over one. So basically, if I had any word that had, say, the letter V in it, V, W, X, Y, and Z, they would be under these notes instead. So a V, as in van, would be under the note B rather than it being under the note A. So again, totally optional if you want to have a, quote, modified last line, something I did for myself, but original system you could use on the left side just to make things easier. Up to you. All right, so here are some examples of my composing process. And again, these are pieces you can hear on my YouTube channel, and also you can play them as sheet music for yourself. So if you check the links in the description, I have links to these pieces. This is part of the Ethereum suite that I wrote. You could also get this as a single movement on its own. But again, check the description below. But here's one example. We have Vayriel, Protector of the Mountains. So I have a friend. She wrote a novel. She also has another friend. So 2 authors in this book. It's called The Ethereum Cycle. And we have Christina, Kelly, and Jonathan Fuller. So Christina wrote this character. I read the book as well when it was in its early stages, and I had an idea of what Vayriel's character was and what I thought about him. And then Christina gave me a description. I asked her, I said, it would be really cool if each character had their own theme song or their own theme, right? So I took on the challenge of kind of doing that for myself as a project, and I came up with this. So Christina told me that Vayriel is protective of her family. She prefers alone time with her animal companion. She's contemplative, she's caring, a bit withdrawn before she knows you, and then she's open to conversation. And then Christina says, I imagine music that's a nature adventure tune, a gentler Lord of the Rings song, light and airy with a touch of longing and a hint of spunk. So in this case, um, I highlighted the words that were related to what I thought would stand out in a piece. And I was thinking, okay, so this wouldn't be a fast piece. It would probably be something very slow. This character seems like they're kind of an introvert. And then Christina told me she wanted something that's kind of like Lord of the Rings, gentle, kind of adventure type tune. And then using the cryptogram system, when I modified the last line, so in this case, the first note is a B. And then these are the notes that I used. So we have B, A, E, D, B, E. Right? So that's the basis of our melody. Those are the notes I'm working with. And then my job was to say, okay, what's the rhythm going to be? How am I going to make it sound like something that's, related to this character or represents the character? So this is kind of what the first opening lines sound like. And then when you hear the melody, that's basically Vayriel's name spelled out. All right. So as you can see, I started with the melody and then I had to extend it just so it had like a complete phrase to it. But essentially, Vayriel's melody is, and that's her name spelled out. Really cool, huh? All right, so I'm going to give you another example. And so this is, again, another character from the Etheria cycle. And then Jonathan Fuller, who's the co-author of this same novel, he said about Zinvar, he said, Zinvar is inquisitive, intelligent, and imaginative, outwardly soft-spoken and quiet, but inwardly feels deep emotion and is very passionate. He said what he imagines if he had music to this character. He said, I imagine a song that ebbs and flows like a river, at times placid and calming, but underneath an air of urgency that turns into a torrent of rushing melody. So I took that on and being like, okay, so I should make something that kind of has like an ebb and flow feel. And one thing that I like to do in my compositions, and I think is very important, is that I don't want to write music that's just really cool sounding, but I also want it to have a purpose. And as an educator and teaching students, I really want to make sure that the pieces I write have some sort of pedagogical or teaching value for students. So as you can see in the left hand there, the piece is ebbing and flowing, or it goes up and down on the left hand. So this piece would be very good for students to use if they need a lot of left hand work. And then also, as you can see, with the fingering there, we have some crossing over. So the fourth finger crosses over the thumb. So say your students are working on the Chopin Fantasy Impromptu, and then they have that B section, if I can play it here. Right? So the left hand crosses over. So the fourth finger has to cross over the thumb there. So same thing happens here with the left hand. So it's a little bit closer. So point being, this piece would be a good supplement to what students are already learning, but at the same time, it has a cryptogram in it, which makes it really fun and really cool. So highly suggest you look at it and buy the music. So anyway, back to the melody line here. So again, Zinvar, his notes are going to be all right. And then I'll have a confession here. So I made a mistake with the V in his name, and I think I was using a modified last line, but I accidentally used the V as an A, as if it was in the original system. So I think while I was composing the piece, I kind of wasn't paying attention, and then I just missed that note. So it probably would be, I think instead of the V being an A, it would probably be, if I was going with the original system. But anyway, the melody ended up being, so I just changed it a little bit. So, and that still worked too. You don't have to use the character's complete name sometimes. But anyway, and this is how it sounds like when you have it all put together. So we have the melody here. So here it goes. Right. So that's what Zinvar's melody sounds like in cryptogram form in Zinvar, Peacemaker of the Volcanic Rifts. All right. So now is your chance to do it at home, or those of you watching. And again, just so you get the process and how it works, is let's say you have cats, and your goal is to find out what are the 4 notes that spell cats. And to make it simple for you, just remember that the top line represents the pitches that you already know and that you have, right? So if you have C in the word that you're trying to make into musical notes, C already stands for C. And then A is already A, so you have that. So your goal is basically to just try to find out what would the musical pitches for T and S be. So pause the video here and see if you can figure it out. And then I'll let you find out on the next slide. All right, you ready? Drum roll, please. All right, so CATS translated to musical notes is CAFE. So we have, and what's really cool, sometimes, yes, you're going to spell another word with these pitches. That doesn't always happen, but that's kind of a cool side effect. So if you were able to figure it out, put an emoji down in the comment section. And then if you watch this in the future, or any of you watching, you know what those emojis mean. So good job. All right, so we have the steps that I talked about earlier. And again, if we're going with cats as our idea and we're translating it into notes, so we want to have the intention. So here's an example of the intention is we want to make a short piece of 4 measures of basic rhythms. So we're being more specific about our intention. So a short piece, 4 measures, basic rhythms, it's about cats. And then step 2 was, okay, how do we want the words or the 4 notes to sound like? And then where you place them, where you place those notes. So this again is something I'll talk about coming up, but basically those 4 notes can be placed anywhere starting out. So again, we can start with middle C, we can start with a C here, start with a C here. So you want to start deciding where do those 4 notes go, and then you want to think, what kind of cats are we dealing with? Are we going to have fun cats? We're going to have silly cats? We're going to have sad cats? You know, are the cats going on an adventure? You want to think about, you know, what will the music sound like? And you can experiment with rhythms and things like that. And then, kind of like what I was saying, how do you want the music to sound? You want to use adjectives or describe these cats. Again, are they funny? Are they fast? Are they slow? Are they telling a story? Something like that, right? And then we have who or what is this for? So again, are you making this piece for yourself? Are you making this for a student that's going to be playing this? What playing level is this piece going to be comfortable with? Or who's the audience you're playing this for? Are you giving this, dedicating this to somebody, etc.? And then here is my version of the cats piece. Again, it's only 4 measures long. We're using basic or simple rhythms. So here we just have quarter notes, half notes, whole notes, and a quarter rest. And then you could also add accidentals, which I'll be mentioning coming up. So in this case, instead of the C, A, F, E, I have C sharp. A, F sharp, E, right? And then my version of the cats, or my mood of the cats, would be they're fluffy, they're cuddly, and they're cute. So I wanted something that sounds cute, right? And then this is going to be for a beginner student or someone that's a little bit later in their journey. They're able to play triads or inversions, and then, you know, be able to use their 5-finger patterns. So this is what cute, fluffy, cuddly, cute cats sound like. So let me know in the comments if that sounded cute, fluffy, and cuddly to you, or if not. I'm open to feedback. All right. And then this is a fun exercise you can do as well. So same thing like we did before with the cats exercise. You can pause the video here and see if you can create a cipher code. So you're going to disguise the word that you know, but you may want to hide it in the music. And then what would those musical pitches be using this French-English system? So we got our little chart on the right side. And again, just a reminder, we have the 7 pitches on the top. And then say you had, so let's go with the first one. So I'll give you the first 2 letters for sun. So sun, we have S, right? And then what column does it fall under? It falls under the note E. So your first musical pitch would be E for the S and sun. So E would be the first note. And then we have a U. So where would U be? U is over here. And then what note does it fall under? It falls under the note G, right? So the first 2 musical pitches for sun would be E and G, and then you can figure out the rest, right? So pause the video here, try to figure it out, and then you'll see on the next slide. Ta-da! So these are your musical pitches for these words here. And again, I added the sharps under mermaid, and that actually makes it sound different. And we will talk about that in a bit. And these are the encrypted notes here. All right, so this is a very important point of the video. So look at the top where it says note combinations sound different and can change the musical effect. So what I'm saying is wherever you place the notes on the staff or what registers you place them in, that makes the melody sound different. And then also if you add sharps or flats, that also makes it sound different. And then I encourage you to use different rhythms because using different rhythms changes how the melody is going to sound. And then it's all up to you. So you can experiment to see which melody and harmonies work and also which rhythms work. And also don't be afraid to even put the notes in chord form or put them all together. So they don't have to even be single melodies. You can put them as clusters, just so long as you include the notes in some form or relationship to each other. And then again, the audience isn't necessarily going to know what's happening or they're not going to hear it necessarily, but it's kind of one of those little like things that you know because you put it in the music. And it's, again, fun to compose in this way because it has a message and meaning to you, and it may not come through the music, but also it can as you're writing it, right? And just to play you some examples, so Ariel, for example, the first example we have is where it goes, starts on an A, goes up to a D, down to a B, and down to EE. So and again, these are just kind of placeholders for the notes. Again, they're not all going to be quarter notes. They can be different rhythms. So if I did a different rhythm, it could be, so that's one. We could do, or something like that, right? You get the idea. And then we have other combinations or variations on those notes. We have, or we have, or this one. So if the E isn't repeated, we have, and then you can experiment from there. When you get to mermaid, so like I said before, so the original mermaid without any sharps or flats, it would be, so that could be a piece, but then if you add sharps, right? And does that sound like a basis for a melody or something you can expand on? Perhaps. I mean, I kind of like how that sounds. And again, there's different combinations you could use. And then we have piece, so that's another one. So the notes are, or sorry, let's try that again. So this is in the treble clef. I know it's not listed there, but first one is, sorry. Well, the first piece that was below the word piece. Okay, the one next to piece where it's spelled out, we have, and then fun fact, so if you go to my YouTube channel, you click on the poem Mother and Son with peace in it. So what I used is I did this, or sorry. So you're going to hear that theme in that poem, and that's again with Christina Kelly, my friend. So we have, so that was a repeating figure I used in that poem as the background music. So take a listen to that if you get a chance. And again, you could also use these in chords. So we have, so those are the same notes. So we have B, we have E, we have two E's, and then we have A, and then we have C. So that's one way you could put that in the music somewhere. Another version of the chord, or sorry, that's one, or you could do this. Right, so many different combinations you could use here. And then, since this is November 2025, it's actually November 30th to be exact. Wicked 2 just came out, I think on the 21st. So I thought it'd be fun to include Elphaba and Glinda in this example of cryptograms. So again, if one of your students is really into Wicked and wants to write a piece about these characters, this is something they could riff on, or they could make a piece about and be inspired by. And as you can see here, Elphaba, the theme here we have is one version, and another version, or you can put them as chords. Sorry, something like that, right? And then Glinda, we have, or we have, or we have, right? And I just want to end this section by saying that there is no right way or order to follow when creating. So again, you can explore the note sequences that match your intention, right? So just keep that in mind. This is a fun creative process. And again, you can start with the rhythm first, you can start with the notes, whatever, but again, the goal is just to translate the letters that you have into musical pitches and then go from there. And then see if that matches the mood or however you want the piece to sound, and just kind of try to line those up as best you can. All right, so now you get to see in the next slide, or the next video I'm going to show you, is I'm going to use this cryptogram composing process in action. So I'm going to take Elphaba's theme, or Elphaba's name, and I'm going to try to riff off that and create a mini piece on it. It's not going to be perfect. I'm just going to do some experimentation with it, but that kind of shows the process of what I go through when you're writing a piece or experimenting with, you have a melody, you have an idea, and you want to kind of see, what can I come up with? What sounds can I make? What's the impression? So stay tuned and enjoy in this next video. And this, again, is all about self-expression and helping you to be creative. Hello there. All right, so this portion of the video is me going to improvise and see if I can come up with a melody or some sort of idea using Elphaba as the main theme or main cryptogram. And again, this is the process of going through kind of the steps that I talked about of, say we have an idea and we want to come up with a melody with it, and then kind of thinking about what's the mood of the piece, or what do we want the piece to sound like, and what's it for, etc. And again, this is just kind of the early stages of a composing process. Me personally, I wouldn't kind of come up with everything right away, but then this is just kind of like putting ideas on the keyboard, or kind of throwing things out there, see what I like to hear, what works, what maybe might not work. And again, it could start off sounding like this, but then the end product could sound totally different. But this is an idea of how it works, or how I like to process things. So moving through it, we have Elphaba's theme. and taken from the slide we just did. So I'm going to be using, this one here, this first one, Alright, so that's going to be the basis of the theme. So we have the notes here, we have so these are the notes I'm working with. And then thinking about Elphaba as a character. So I've seen a little bit of the musical, and then I saw Wicked, the first one, or the first portion. So I think of Elphaba as a character. I think of someone that's very ambitious, someone that's very determined, someone that's very direct. Like, she knows what she wants. She also has a very, I guess, how you say, moral standing. Like, she believes in certain things. If you haven't watched the movie, spoiler alert, but like, she stands up for animal rights. Like, she wants to know what's happening with Dr. Doleman, things like that. But she's very like, she has very strong convictions about things. So I imagine a character that's very strong, that's very determined. She's very forward moving. So the piece would have to be something that's very upbeat, that's very like driven, someone that's very direct. So again, it wouldn't necessarily be a slow, lyrical kind of fantasy, emotive piece, right? It could be if you want to interpret it Elphaba that way. But I think Elphaba is somebody that's very, almost like a warrior in a sense, because she's always going through something. So it's almost like a dramatic piece, right? And then you look at her, she's green. So again, people look at her, they react a certain way. She has a reputation. So again, something I think that's loud, something that's fast, or just very upbeat, not slow. And then if there were going to be a slow part, so say a B section or a contrasting section, it would be something that's maybe more melancholy because she has the outcast feeling, or she feels like no one understands her, etc. Right? So that's the idea you want to start with, or in thinking about it. So we have the notes here. And then I like to usually start with kind of a rhythm. So what would the melody be like as far as a rhythm goes? And then if you listen, it doesn't really end. There's no kind of like tonic note, or there's no kind of like ending to it, so you have to kind of extend the melody so it ends. So it's like question and answer, or you want to have a resolution to it. And then that's where you have to think about, okay, how would I extend this melody? And then even just playing, say, a 5-finger pattern, or like taking the width of the notes, or the range, it goes up to E, goes up to B. So I just took a scale, E to E, and then with an F sharp, it becomes an E natural minor scale. So essentially that's the key we're working in, or I think we're working in with this. So also think about kind of, once you find the melody, kind of think about what key is it going to be, or what kind of tonal atmosphere are we dealing with. So again, we're trying to end the melody. So I think that would work. And since I think of her as very direct, very kind of like straightforward, you know, I don't think I would put much variation in the rhythm, so. And then if I were to put some rhythm to it, it would probably be in the accompaniment. So let me improvise and see what we come up with, and it may or may not end like with the whole piece, but this is just a general idea of how the cryptogram composing process works. So we have. All right, so let me know what you think in the comments if that was something that could be expanded on, but that's basically a general idea of how I would start the process of ideas. So what's interesting is the left hand could have been so stepwise motion, but then I also like the make it more interesting, or you could do the 6-5-4-1 or 1-6-1-6. 1-6-4-5. Right, so again, happy composing, and that's the general idea of taking something that you like or are interested in and making music out of it. Thanks for listening. All right, so now we come to the additional resources portion of the video, and here are some resources that I'd recommend to help you on your cryptogram composing journey. So these are a few highlights that I would suggest, and I am not sponsored by any of these suggestions that I have, but I think these are very good resources to help you get started. So first is The Wild Symphony by Dan Brown. If you know, Dan Brown is an author. He's also a composer, and he's famous for the Da Vinci Code and other books that he's written. And Wild Symphony is a great picture book that has cryptograms in it. It has a cryptogram puzzle at the end, and it's also good for, say, little kids or school-age children, or just anyone basically, to introduce them to instrument sounds. It has a cute little story to go along with it, and the animals are part of that story. But basically, it just introduces you to the different sounds of the orchestra, what they make, and also kind of solving a puzzle at the end, which again goes with cryptograms. So that's a good introduction to code breaking and things like that. I also recommend the Walden School. We have the Young Musicians Program, and that's basically a 5-week summer school festival. It's for ages 9 through 18. And this is a great festival camp that focuses on composition and developing musicianship skills for students and kids and anybody interested in composing. It's pretty intensive, but also it just helps them learn a lot. If I was a kid, I wish I was able to attend that. But there's also an adult version of the Walden School. It's called the Creative Musicians Retreat, and that's for adults 18 and up. And I've attended that program 2 summers in a row. And that's also very helpful because that also allows for original compositions to be premiered. And one of the pieces or 2 of the pieces, chamber pieces on my website and YouTube channel are pieces from their Creative Musicians Retreat. And they use cryptograms in them. So highly recommended program at the Walden School. And then we have, and which is the greatest resource I think on this page and this slide, is Code Composing at Home. And this is for and from the Birmingham Contemporary Music Group. And basically this worksheet is everything I talked about in this slide video presentation. So it basically breaks down everything I talked about in a step-by-step way, a very easy way to, again, for example, take somebody's name and then take those letters and translate them into notes, and then you can make melodies out of them. So this is a very simple and easy way to get started with cryptograms and how to just make simple melodies out of them. And this worksheet is very simple and helpful in that process. So again, I highly recommend this worksheet by the Birmingham Contemporary Music Group. And again, I'll put links to all of these in the description below. And then finally, we have The Ultimate Guide to Left-Hand Piano Styles and Patterns by Tim Topham. Tim Topham is a piano educator based off in Australia. He's very helpful in talking about how students can improvise and how it's great to get them introduced to the piano and music making. So his guide is free, and basically it's a lot about left-hand accompaniment patterns, and I would suggest this. So for example, you create a cryptogram melody in the right hand or whatever instrument you have, but you want to add an accompaniment to it, say on the piano, and you're struggling for ideas. So this left-hand pattern guide kind of gives you an idea of different left-hand patterns you could use. So if you want your left-hand accompaniment to be, say, like in a rock style or maybe like a classical style, or just get some general ideas as to what to do with accompaniment to match your melody and what kind of mood you want, this would be a great guide and resource. So again, these are great resources for you. The links will be in the description below. And again, I hope these resources help you in your cryptogram composing journey. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed this video about cryptogram composing. And you learned a little bit about the process on how to create pieces that are meaningful to you and have messages behind those notes. So comment below. Tell me, what words would you use to create your original music? What are some things that you're inspired by? And say you're writing an original piece, who would you dedicate the piece to? I'd love to know. And also for those of you that are educators out there, I work with students, let me know if you'd like me to make another video related to this process. I have ideas for creating introductory exercises for beginning level players, for advanced players, and also college level students, and also some activities and ideas for class piano students that they could use and you could use in your lesson plans and integrate them into your curriculum. So comment below if you'd like to see more of that. And finally, again, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. You get to see some of my videos that I post and also original compositions that I make for piano, solo, and chamber ensemble. And again, I'm trying to grow my channel, and the means of my channel is really about that music is a creative storytelling device, and it helps with self-expression and self-empowerment, as I'm trying to create an atmosphere that a positive mindset and continuing to work with small wins as you work on your music creating journey or just creative journey in general is helpful, and it's very important in today's society. And again, I would love it if you'd subscribe and like this video and share it with anybody who you think would benefit from it. So that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks. Bye.